Next thing we want to talk about is infidelity. And I think we should basically come at this from two angles. One is how to avoid infidelity, and the other is what to do if there is infidelity. How do you recover from that? Mm-hmm. So as for how to avoid it, you want to start us off?
Yeah, I can start on that. I think the first thing to do there is there's a couple of things to acknowledge, okay? The first thing to acknowledge is that we're all vulnerable to infidelity.
Yeah.
The minute that we begin to think that'll never happen to me and let our guards down is when it's going to sneak up on us. The Bible says that we have an enemy who roams around like a lion seeking someone to destroy. And I guarantee you, if you have a godly marriage, the enemy is seeking to destroy that, and he's going to be lurking in the shadows. And so we have to be on our guard. So that's the first thing I would say is be on our guard. The other thing is to be self-aware. We're human. Just because we're married does not mean that we wouldn't like someone else or be their personality might draw us in, especially if we're under a lot of stress at home. And, we go home and at home we have to deal with reality. Right? I mean, we can go somewhere else outside the home. And we only, it's like dating someone. When you're dating someone, everything can be flowery. But once you get married, you get down to the real deal of living life.
Right.
So, infidelity can start that way because we bump into somebody in a situation where we're not having to deal with the reality of life. It's all just, roses and that kind of stuff. So, we need to be on guard for that. And we need to be self-aware enough to recognize in ourselves, hey, I'm being attracted to this person. I need to change something. I need to put a separation. Just, we talked about boundaries earlier on on money. We need to do the same thing with those relationships. If we feel ourselves being drawn in, we need to put up a boundary of some form or another. Maybe if we're drawn to that personality of the other person, let's just avoid them. Let's don't engage. Let's don't make the joke that we would make or whatever.
It's not worth it.
And so we have to be aware that we're doing that. And then I think the other thing is we need some accountability. If we do find ourselves feeling that way, confession again is good for the soul. We should tell somebody and say, hey, I need some help. This goes back to our whole conversation of talking to somebody. I mean, imagine yourself in a small group pulling one of your guys aside and saying, I'm worried that I'm being attracted to this person at work. That's an uncomfortable conversation, admittedly. Mm-hmm. I've never had anybody do that to me at church. You know what I'm saying? Most people think, I could never do that at church. But that is what we're in this thing together. Mm-hmm. Better to do that and to create somebody who can talk to you about it and hold you accountable to create those boundaries than just to let it go and wind up making a mistake.
Yeah. Yeah, and we see that lack of accountability even at the highest levels of leadership, It seems like every month or so, another pastor that thousands of people look up to has disqualified himself. And why? Usually it's some form of sexual misconduct. We need to have the people around us who are aware of what's going on with us and who can check up on us. I don't like the idea of putting everything in one's own court because I just don't think that we are that much to be trusted. You need to have people who are reaching out to you rather than always relying on you, because when you do experience that attraction for somebody, the likelihood is maybe you do want to have some kind of relationship with them. Maybe you're at that point de-incentivized from allowing some kind of intervention to happen.
Well, I'll just point out some real basic things, super basic things that would get people in trouble. My wife knows where I'm at all times. I've got a phone where she can track my location. If I were to say, I'm uncomfortable with that, I think I'm going to turn my location services off. bad idea. You know, you're creating space for yourself to make a problem.
Mm-hmm.
Usually if I'm traveling, I will call John and I will say, hey, I'm at the airport, or I'm, leaving the hotel, or I just got back to the hotel. She can get on her phone at any time and see where I'm at. She can call me anytime. She can text me anytime. So, we need to live life in the light. The minute we create dark corners for ourselves where we can do things without people finding out, we're setting ourselves up for trouble. Mm-hmm. And all the issues that you just brought, where you have leaders being sexual misconduct and infidelity and all that, I just about tell you 100% of the time, there's a lack of accountability with what they're doing, where they're at, who they're associating with. And you've got people around them that won't speak up and say, hey, this is an issue. Mm-hmm. You need to be aware of this. I mean, you just hard to overstate having those people in your life. I mean, it would start with your spouse, but other people around you who you have given the freedom to say, if you see me getting off track, tell me.
Right. So you're back to boundaries again. Mm-hmm. And, people will rail against that kind of thing, saying that it betrays a lack of trust mm-hmm. and so on. Here's what I'll say. This is true for money, and it's true for infidelity, and it's true for anything else that you want to talk about. You can have as much freedom as you have responsibility. And there are some people in this world who are so responsible with their money, they can buy everything with a credit card. They can spend as much as they want without ever really having to think about it, and then pay it off at the end of the month. Mm-hmm. There are some people who do not need a credit card, who even a debit card is risky for them, who probably should only carry around a certain amount of cash with them. If you're in the latter group, that's fine, as long as you're regarding yourself as such. So it's time to get humble, and it's time to bring someone else in who can look at your behavior and say, yeah, this is clearly not working for you. You need some more boundaries. Boundaries mm-hmm. are a good thing, and freedom is also a good thing, but we can only have as much freedom as we have responsibility.
Yeah, I mean, again, just some more practical things along these lines. We're talking about preventing infidelity here. Yeah. Your spouse should have free access to your phone.
Yeah.
And this is so basic, but if you're scared to give your spouse your phone and let her or him browse through it to see who you're texting, who your calls are to, mm-hmm. where you've been on the internet, mm-hmm. then you got a problem. And maybe
there's really nothing that you can do on a phone that your spouse should not know about, with the exception of planning a surprise birthday party or something.
Yeah. And I mean, maybe you don't want to give your phone to a friend and let them go through it, okay? But your spouse is different. And so I would say, let's live in the light. Let's don't have those dark corners, and phones and schedules are just one thing. There are other areas where you could run into trouble here. But from a preventing infidelity standpoint, just be open and live in the light.
Yeah. And people will say, that's a violation of my privacy. There is no privacy with your spouse. That's like the whole point.
You're one person. I mean,
exactly.
that is the point. You are one person. There is, as you say, there is no privacy anymore from those kind of things. I mean, you have united together in life, and you shouldn't be hiding things from one another.
Yeah. Well, I'll just say this, and then I think we should move on to the latter thing. While we're talking about openness with your spouse, another question is, if you have developed feelings for some other person, to what degree should you let your spouse in on that? And without saying anything too concrete, what I will say is, after you've had an affair is not the right time to let your spouse in on your feelings for another person. It needs to be some time before. And we could debate about when that should be, but it needs to be at some point. Is that awkward? Yes. Could it be awkward if that person is in both of your circles? Yeah, totally. Is it better than having an affair? Yes, definitely.
Yeah, and I think, if we, I'm sitting here advocating for openness, which I definitely think we should. That doesn't mean that you tell the spouse every thought that runs through your mind, because sometimes things run through your mind that you just say, okay, that's inappropriate, and I'm putting that aside. But if you have a thought like that and it lingers, or you find yourself dwelling on that thought, then yeah, you should bring that to your spouse. To your point, you don't want that to grow until it becomes an actual infidelity issue, and then you have to tell them about it. Much better to deal with it ahead of time and not allowing it to happen.
Yeah, and you need to see how that impacts them. Mm-hmm. Because presumably you still love them, right? And if you are having some kind of fantasy or some kind of inappropriate relationship with some person, when you bring that to your spouse, you're going to see how that impacts them emotionally, which is going to provide a lot of immediacy to your restraint.
Well, let me just say right there too, we need to bring every thought into captivity. I wish I could quote that exact
to see
verse
what,
there.
Of what sort it is, yeah.
Yeah, but so we don't need to be cheating on our spouse in our minds. We do not need to be having thoughts that we let go in our mind. We need to quench those thoughts. If we're having thoughts of, fantasizing about some other person or some person at the office or on TV or wherever, whomever, mm-hmm. we need to squelch those thoughts. We need to get rid of them. And if we can't do that on our own, then we need to confess them to our spouse. We need to have an accountability partner that says, hey, I'm really struggling with this. Help me here. Mm-hmm. And so it's not just our actions, it's our thought life too. We need to be very careful not to let that go.